You can study hard for years, but still not get fluent. And I should know, because I failed learning Spanish at first. Until I realized that the problem wasn't me or my effort, it was the method. So today I want to break down the reason why you're trying hard but not getting the results you want. And give you the simple 3-step system that actually worked to get me fluent in both Spanish and Japanese fast. Before getting into the system, we have to understand why most methods and advice don't work in the first place. See, there's a pattern among these that tend to get people stuck on this hamster wheel just looking for a new app or a new hack, but making no progress. It's that they treat the symptoms, but they ignore the root cause. If you aren't making progress, the solution isn't to do more of what isn't working. It's doing the complete opposite. Successful language learners don't do more things. They first figure out what's actually needed to reach their goals, then remove everything else, and they only focus on a few core things and do them well at the right times. And with that in mind, we can get into the simple routine that cuts out all the fluff and gets you fluent in any language in 3 to 12 months. Step 1 is the first few months, and getting this right is crucial because a lot of people will quit here before they even have the time to get anywhere. And there's really only one thing you gotta focus on to get started. That is learning the basics of the language fast while not burning out. And there's 3 parts to that. The first thing you wanna do is to learn how the language sounds. This is super underrated and often overlooked. I've seen people skip this, but what happens then is that it quietly ruins your pronunciation for years to come. And it's the reason for why some people will sound almost like a native and others get stuck with this really strong accent. So before you do anything else, even if it seems tempting to just start studying by the way, make sure that at least part of your time is spent learning the sounds of the language. Both studying it, looking what kinds of sounds are different from your own native language, but also just listening to some podcasts and YouTube videos to hear how native speakers sound. Not only will this save your pronunciation long term from you not building up any bad habits of mispronouncing words, and instead good habits, but also help you easier identify words when you hear them in a video or in a conversation in the future. But just doing this won't get you fluent, so you gotta do step 2 as well. And that is probably the most important thing. The second thing is learning the most common words of the language. This is incredibly important because it might seem tempting to just learn any word that you see. I know I used to think that the more the merrier, and it felt really productive. But that is a huge mistake because the 1,000 most common words in a language make up about 80% of the things that people say on a day-to-day basis. And so unless your time is unlimited, it makes more sense to focus on the ones that give you the best bang for your buck. And the way you do that is pretty simple. First, you look up a frequency list. There's tons of word frequency lists online, but you can also get them from like ChatGPT. And you decide on learning anywhere from 5 to 20 new words a day, depending on how much time you have available. How you learn them doesn't matter as much as which words you learn, but my recommended way of doing it is via a flashcard app such as Anki. That way you have a built-in algorithm that tells you when to review them, and you also make sure that you don't forget them over time. But you can also write them down on paper if you want to do that. By learning some of these common words, you can in just a few months get a massive head start that makes everything that comes after this way easier to understand and gets you talking and conversational very quickly. But just learning words isn't going to be enough, so you also need something else. And the third thing is to learn the basic grammar of the language. And before you ask, no, you don't have to memorize every single grammar rule there is. I'm not your old high school teacher. But it is worth your while to spend some time learning the basic grammar stuff, like for example, how to make a noun into a plural, or how you conjugate a verb to say that you're doing something or some other person is doing something. These take a very short amount of time to learn, but they give you a very big reward. In the first few months, the most important thing is that you are making good progress, but that you can also stick to your routine, that you enjoy it. And so if you want to do this with a textbook or with an app or with some sort of tutor or AI or whatever, that's completely up to you. Just pick something, ideally one resource, that takes you through the most fundamental grammar and just stick to it. And once you follow these 3 things for a few months, you're going to be at a pretty decent spot and know the basics of the language. And you've set yourself up for success. But now it's time to take the next step and actually get good. There's a big mistake almost everyone makes a few months into learning. And it sounds logical, but if you make it, it's going to keep you stuck a beginner forever. When I was a few months into learning Spanish, I'd made great progress so far, but I had a problem. Anytime I tried listening to or having a conversation myself, I always had to pause, think for a second, and translate in my head. It was never automatic like it is in your native language, and I always felt like my brain was kind of lagging behind, and it just felt super unnatural. So I figured I just had to study more. And I repeated an old audio course that I found a lot of success with the first time around. But it didn't work. Even though I'd memorized the grammar rules more and I'd learned the words even better, I still had this problem. And that's when I realized that studying will get you started, but it won't take you all the way to the finish line. Because think about it. Studying, what is that even? It's memorizing, it's thinking, it's translating, it's having these rigid rules that you're trying to remember. But fluency, when I'm just speaking with you right now, that's automatic. I'm not remembering any of these things. And so to actually get to this point where you can speak freely and understand freely, we have to also spend some time putting the things that we've learned into real practical use. The first step to putting this into use is to make watching YouTube videos, TV shows, and listening to podcasts a regular part of your routine. I remember this felt really challenging at first when I started, but after a while you get used to it. And the good thing these days is that there's tons of content made for beginners. So we just want to start easy and get used to it over time. The benefit of learning in this way, especially once you've already built a little base from studying, is that you start to internalize the language. So all the words that you'd kind of learned but not really gotten, you start filling in the gaps from hearing native speakers use them in certain contexts and when they're talking about certain things. And you also start picking up new parts of the language that your brain just spots because it's a pattern recognition machine essentially. And everything starts clicking and just feeling a lot more natural without you even having to study it necessarily. This should feel challenging, but still doable. And when I did this for a while, I noticed that after a few weeks or so, this lag just started disappearing out of nowhere. And I was picking up new things every day just via osmosis. It was a really fascinating feeling. When you start watching a lot of content in the language, you can put your studying on the back burner and see that more as a separate activity that helps you learn a few more words here and there or make a few grammar concepts a little clearer. But on top of watching content and studying a little bit, you need to start speaking a lot. Words and grammar and all these things that you're learning, they won't just turn active automatically. You need to actually put in the effort to start using them yourself. But just like with content, a lot of people make the mistake of starting off way too hard. The common thing, right, is when you're in a classroom and the teacher asks you to start speaking in front of the whole class. And the problem there, or with similar scenarios, is that when you have this feeling of needing to perform, your speaking gets way worse. And you can also easily feel embarrassed if you mess up or anything, right? And so you want to make sure that when you start speaking, you start by just doing it to yourself. Yes, you don't have the corrections, but you're building the habit slowly but surely. And then after a while, when you feel ready to actually have a conversation, then you start doing it. Because stress not only kills your ability to perform and to speak well, but it also ruins your motivation. And if you get lower motivation, you're not going to want to speak as much. So you're going to learn less over time. If you do these two things, you're going to start getting really good really quickly. But we can't stop here, because there's one more thing that tends to stop people right before they start getting really fluent. And that's step 3, which is fine-tuning. Alright, by this point you're actually going to be pretty dang good at the language. But there's one thing that we need to do to make sure that we don't get stuck here. And that is that we get really real with ourselves. Look, pro athletes don't get there by chance. They don't get there by just playing the same game every game and hoping they improve. They watch tape, they talk with their coaches, they review their own weaknesses, and then they drill them specifically to improve on that. If there's a boxer who keeps his hands low, he's gonna notice that because he gets punched in the face. But if you are bad at something in your language learning and you never get the feedback, to correct that mistake, then you're never going to correct that mistake. And so at this point, we need to build in some sort of feedback loop where we're actively reviewing ourselves and seeing what we're bad at so that we can spend more time doing those things, specifically the things that we suck at. And it might not feel as fun doing them in the moment, but that we're really going to be thankful we practiced after a while. And here's where we got to realize that we're all going to be different. Some of us are going to have slightly different natural strengths and weaknesses, and we're also going to have different goals and different time spent on different things. And so we're going to need different routines after a while. Some of you might be really good at watching Netflix, and you might be able to do that with no problem. Your listening skill is great, but you suck at speaking. And in that case, you can't just keep doing what you're good at and what you feel comfortable with. You got to get out of your comfort zone and do the thing that you suck at extra to remove that weakness. Exactly how you do this is a little harder to say because it depends on each person. But I think that just having this awareness and realizing that there's always going to be one or maybe two things that are holding you back the most currently, trying to look for them and really attack them, even if it might seem uncomfortable. Because a lot of times, the things that are going to give you the biggest return on your learning and that are going to improve you the most are the things that are most uncomfortable and that feel the hardest, where your brain has to work the most. But if you can reframe that pain and realize that it's actually more so a growing pain that's going to get you more fluent, then I think it's going to be a lot easier to do. If you follow these 3 steps, you got the routine down. And with consistency, you're going to get conversational within a year. But to have that consistency and don't quit, click the video on screen right here, where I give you the 5-step system to stay motivated, to make time, and to build momentum. Thank you for watching. I'll see you there. And until next time, keep learning.